me at Cello, Cello. You had me at Cello. You had me at Cello. Oh, you had me at Cello. Playing the cello has so many pluses. It never grows old.
Well, hello, everybody. It's 5 o'clock on a Friday. Almost time to practice all weekend long. But first, another installment of Cello Chat. This time brought to you by Tamarack Arts, a wonderful organization, especially designed for adult learners. Check them out at tamarackarts.org. And with me today is Professor Uri Vardi of the University of Wisconsin-Madison. How are you today, Professor Vardi?
I'm doing very well. How are you, Benjamin?
I'm doing well, too. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, please call me Uri.
All right, excellent. Well, can you start by telling about yourself and your musical journey, what first led you to the cello, and then how you, in a nutshell, how you got to be here today?
Wow, that's a long story. Do you have time? Okay, so the accent is Israeli. I was actually born in Hungary, but when I was one, my parents and I immigrated to Israel. And I grew up on, I don't know how many of you know the term kibbutz, which is a collective place where people share everything. So my parents actually were the ones, they belonged to the group that formed this particular kibbutz in Israel, where I grew up, and it's that kibbutz is in the hills of Nazareth, in another part of Israel. So just to let you know, this was in 1948, where the state of Israel was just starting. There was hardly anything there where I grew up. There were just a lot of rocks and snakes and a few trees. And this group of people, they tried different things. They had to invent everything, including education for the kids. So we all went to school there, and we all learned a little recorder as far as our musical background. And when I think I was 13, the kibbutz people decided that it's time maybe to see who could take a more serious instrument than just the recorder. So they brought somebody to audition the kids and see who shows talent. And they told me when I was 13 that, yeah, we think you're talented. Yeah, just you can study an instrument. What do you want to take? And I said cello. And said, well, cello is too late for you at this point. Why don't you take a wind instrument? And those people who know me know how stubborn I am. So I said, no, either cello or nothing. So, and cello was something that really spoke to me. I liked music. I don't come from a musical family. My mother actually liked to sing, and she belonged to a choir, but my father was tone deaf. He liked listening to music, but anyway, so this is how I started. So by the time that everything went through, I was 14, and then I started playing the cello, and I started in the small. I mean, I took cello lessons in the city of Haifa. There was a person who was teaching cello and guitar, and I took cello with him, and I invested a lot. It was just very important for me I wanted to to play. And then after, I think, 2 years or 3 years, I think by the time I was 17, I switched to study with the main cello teacher in Israel who was teaching in the biggest city in Israel, in Tel Aviv. And then I knew right away that this is what I wanted to do. I mean, music and then cello became kind of my voice. I needed it for my sanity. So then I dived right into it, and I was very motivated. Because I've been told, and I knew it, that I started very late, I felt like constantly running after the wagon, trying to get on it, and never really had any particular plans for the future. I just went on and on. Then I went to the main music academy in Israel, in Tel Aviv, at the Tel Aviv University. And then I was just about to, I wanted to continue outside of Israel, and I auditioned for a famous French cellist, Paul Tortelier, who I admired. Some people say that I looked a little bit like him, and I was as wild as he was. So, I went to audition for him. He was teaching at that time, not in Paris, but in Essen, in Germany. So I auditioned for him, and he accepted me to his class. But then a few days later, I was in a festival, in music festival in Holland, and I met the Hungarian string quartet, and the cellist, who happened to be the teacher of my colleague here, Perry Karp, Magyar, told me about Starker in Bloomington. And I didn't know much about Starker, except that I had an LP of his Brahms sonatas. But I didn't know much about his teaching style. And Magyar told me about him. And that was like a day or two after I met with Tortelier, who was just so elated to meet and finally go and study with. And right on that spot, I thought, from what he told me about Starker, that actually I thought that I needed what Starker had to offer, maybe not what Tortelier had to offer. So I asked Mr. Magyar to maybe help me get in touch with Starker, and the rest is history, because a year later, I ended up in Bloomington and started studying with him there. And from there, I went. I got on the Artist Diploma program there. First, I was a special student just studying cello with him, and chamber music with an amazing musician, Gyorgy Sebok, who was the pianist on the LP that I owned of the Brahms sonatas. And then I went to Yale to do my master's with Aldo Parisot. And after that, went back to Israel, was teaching there, was principal cellist of the Israel Sinfonietta in the southern city of Beersheba, and then became associate principal cellist of the Israel Chamber Orchestra in Tel Aviv, but mostly was interested in teaching. I never really liked that much playing in orchestra, so I ended up mostly teaching, and then there was an opening for the position in Madison, at UW-Madison, and last minute, a friend told me about that opening, a friend from Eastman. I was still in Israel, and she said, well, I know this place and I know you. I think it's going to be a good fit. but the problem is that the deadline is next week for application. At that time, I never thought about having a proper CV, curriculum vitae, or demo performances. And I told her, and she said, I'll help you put it together. You'll just dub some of your performances on a cassette. Those days we sent cassettes. Luckily, we had FedEx in Israel already. So a day before the deadline, I could put everything in an envelope and FedEx it to UW. And then they invited me for the interview. And this is 30 years ago. Long story, I told you.
That's excellent. I love it. Well, now, the main theme of this series is motivating and inspiring students to play cello, to practice cello. So this can be a two-part question, or you can roll them into the same thing. What are some of the things that are highest on your list that motivate or inspire you when you play cello? And the second question is, how about with your students? What's kind of in your toolbox, your bag of tricks for helping to motivate your students as well?
Well, I might rephrase some of your questions because I don't like to trick students. So yeah, I'm very much into figuring out what is there that we can find together that might be motivating them, or what holds them back from being motivated. So I usually, I'm very curious about how they function, or what it is that I've talked quite a bit about it, that for me, teaching and learning are the same thing. It's the same coin, just the two different sides of it. So for me, when I'm engaged with a student, I need to learn about that student first. I'm not there to make them do anything. I'm there to get to know them and what is there. And together with my curiosity about that, very often I found that they become curious also about what else is there, or what holds them back from getting what they want. So I'm asking students a lot of questions, and I try to do it within a playful way, especially with younger students. I haven't taught young students since I came here 30 years ago. I mean, some young students, but not that many. But in Israel, when I started, for about 12, 15 years, I mostly was teaching younger students, like kids, teenagers. Many of them these days are professional musicians who are everywhere here in the States and in Israel. But and I think the idea of me being curious about them actually motivates them to find more about themselves, rather than me trying hard. And that's why tricking them is something that is I don't want to trick them. I want to figure out together with them what they feel about music. Okay, what holds them back if they feel something and are not able to express it? What holds them back from being diligent about accomplishing something that they want? And sometimes it's about how much they want it. And if they don't want it that much, I don't want to force them to want it more. I want to, adjust to where they are and see if that's the limit. And then, okay, then we can deal with that in that way. And I'm not going to try very hard to change them to want more or to invest more, because it's very clear, it becomes very clear to me that this is where they are. So again, I'm not there to change them. I'm there to figure out together with them all those things that maybe they are not aware of about themselves, and and the relationship between themselves and music and cello.
Well,
that was very up there, philosophical.
No, and along those lines, actually, I want to recommend to all the viewers that they read your statement of teaching philosophy on your website, for which we'll give them the URL, because that's, first of all, it's a very nice statement to begin with. I like it. And then also, it's kind of more comprehensive than even the people who do have statements like that. Yours is, again, like you say, philosophical and pretty deep. I like it.
Thank you.
All right. So now you have a lot of irons in the fire, a lot of different projects going on. I wonder if you'd say a little bit about each of these, the St. Petersburg School, for example.
Okay, so at the times, I think it was 1995 or 4, because of my background, being Israeli, also my parents who are Holocaust survivors, and the whole Holocaust saga has been an important part of my upbringing and kind of looming part of my history. I'm not even surprised. I wouldn't be surprised that I really got so deeply into music because of some of the horrors that I heard, and I wanted to find an anchor for myself to stay a little bit further away from it and be able to express myself in a way that I could communicate some of the things that I've been feeling. But maybe because of the Holocaust, I became quite interested in Jewish music. That's music that hasn't been performed that much. And I started researching and came across the St. Petersburg School of Composers. And the St. Petersburg School, there was a society of Jewish music in St. Petersburg. And the members of many members of that society were students of Rimsky-Korsakov, who was teaching there at that time. And the story goes that he used to tell his students to go out and search for roots for themes from the culture around his students and write music around those themes. And he approached the Jewish students in his class and told them, just go to the shtetl, to the little ghetto, Jewish ghetto, and get some of the roots of the music that is there. So many of them ended up collecting music, themes of that music, and composing on those themes. And so they also wanted to conserve some of these tunes, and they composed this music. So I researched that and found music for cello and piano, and arranged a few things that were written maybe for violin and piano, and and decided to have a project of recording them, and there was there's a museum in Tel Aviv that also produced CDs, which is called the Diaspora Museum at the University of the Tel Aviv University in Tel Aviv, Israel, and they actually sponsored that project. So then we recorded them, and there is a CD of the St. Petersburg School that is available somewhere. I don't know where these days.
Well, now then, did that lead to fusions?
Okay, so fusions is all then. Okay, so I got very interested in Jewish music, but then living in Israel, and I grew up in that kibbutz, which was surrounded by Arab villages and the city of Nazareth. And every morning I would wake up hearing the muazzin, which is the person calling for prayer from the tower of the mosque. And you could hear it around everywhere on the hills around, like echoing. And I grew up with Western music, classical music ideas, and all those different sounds that sounded so out of tune to me and so not very appealing. And I looked down at it like, what's that? I mean, but after looking into the St. Petersburg School, I started really getting very curious about Arab music. And I got to meet a fantastic musician there, Taysir Elias, who is an oud player. Oud is like the Western lute. It's the same shape of the lute. And actually lute, the word lute comes from the word el-oud that became lute, because it has been influenced by the Arabic oud. And I just fell in love with that instrument, with this particular musician. And we decided to collaborate and create something that we called fusions, which was an idea of putting in one evening some classical Jewish music, but if you can call Jewish music Jewish, I mean, it's Western music influenced maybe by Jewish motives, and Arab art music. I called it Arabic art music until somebody told me that actually it's the Arab music. It's the Arabic is the language, and the music is actually Arab. Anyway, so I needed to correct it, and so we created that this evening, and we commissioned a trio for cello, oud, and piano. That the member of the group, Menachem Wiesenberg, who's also the composer of that piece, and so we performed it a few times, and we had a long tour in the States in the mid-90s. And from that, I commissioned the Double Concerto for cello, oud, and symphony orchestra, and the Madison Symphony actually put that on their, I don't remember where it was, but it
was a while ago.
Yeah, on their subscription program. And actually, the chancellor, UW-Madison chancellor, actually raised the funds for the commission for me.
Excellent.
And if those of us, the cellists who know Gyorgy Hoffman, very famous cellist, his brother, Joel Hoffman, who wrote quite a few pieces for cello and piano, who was the composer who wrote the Double Concerto, which is called the 40 Steps. And the 40 steps, what he did with that, he created a new scale. 40 steps, it's number 40, it's a symbolic number, both in Jewish and Arab cultures. And he decided to create a scale of 40 notes, which means that in every register, you use different notes, but everybody, the orchestra and the two soloists are using only those notes within those registers, which was quite interesting because he didn't want the oud to be influenced by Jewish music or the cello to be influenced by Arab music. So he decided just to create something completely new for both instruments and the orchestra.
Nice. Now, can you tell a bit about Feldenkrais and when did you encounter the method approach?
Okay, here we go to a different. So Feldenkrais, some people, I don't know, some people think that it might have to do with Christ, which it doesn't. We are entering the Christmas, but it has nothing to do with Christ. Feldenkrais is a name. It's the name of the creator of this method, Moshe Feldenkrais, who actually was Israeli, and he was a genius. He loved music, but it came for he was a scientist who did his doctorate at the Sorbonne in Paris before the Second World War. And yeah, his doctorate was in physics, but he was also the first European, I think, who got the black belt in judo. So he was very, very interested in martial arts. So his whole idea about the evolution of everybody's idea about how to move in the world and how everybody's way of dealing with movement is like a fingerprint. Mm-hmm. And the idea is that, for instance, if you go in a dark alley and you see somebody, just the shadow of somebody that you know moving in front of you, you don't see that person, you can definitely recognize that person by the way that you see them move. And everybody actually creates their own fingerprint about how they relate to movement and being in the world based on their experience growing up as kids, how they figured out what to do. Because humans, I don't know any sane parent who will take their kid's foot and put it in a certain place to teach them how to walk. This is not how it goes, because kids learn by trial and error, and they fall and they find it. But curiosity is the part that really is the key element in their learning. And the problem is that once they start going to school, and once we start going to school, and then we have to know math and to read and to follow expectations of others, many kids lose the curiosity and the fun of discovering new things, and they get stuck in that place that they acquired at age, 3 or something. And we don't even know that this habitual pattern that we created for ourselves to move, it's something that we actually stop the process because we don't have any more time, because society forces us to be so intelligent and so good. So Feldenkrais actually decided to put people into that place of curiosity and finding what else is there in you that you don't know yet, because you stopped that process so early. And I discovered that it's for us musicians, it has become so helpful, because many of us, a lot of the things, the troubles that we encounter derive from our stuckness in those habits of movement without even knowing that that's the case. We don't even know that we are prisoners in a very tiny cell. And the only way to get a little bit further out from that cell is to become aware of more options that we kind of eliminated early on because our brain could not really be engaged in it anymore because it needed to know all these mathematic equations and remembering all those important things in life. I don't know if this explains.
Yeah, it's and for further application specifics, etc., people need to check out the Feldenkrais for Musicians workshop at the National Summer Cello Institute, don't they?
Well, now we changed the term. Now we call it "Your Body Is Your Strad."
I like
Stradivarius. It is not the instrument that you pay like $10 million for that will determine how great music you're going to produce. It is the real instrument, which is you and how you use yourself in order to produce the sound through that instrument that you need to purchase. But yourbodyisyourstrad.com is where you can find more information about the Feldenkrais. And also, so we created an institute here in Madison, which was called at that time the National Summer Cello Institute in conjunction with Feldenkrais for Musicians. But I think just 2 or 3 years before COVID, we moved to upstate New York, to the Adirondacks, to Caroga Lake. And so the Institute moved there, a beautiful place. And we had 2 institutes there in place. And usually the institutes are for 2 weeks, and we explore different ideas about how to expand your understanding of your function as a musician. It was mostly for cellists. Now it's open to all string players. And since COVID, we started the virtual institutes. So we are actually just about to start our 4th one on January 3rd. It will be for 5 days from the 3rd to the 8th. And you can find information about it on our website, yourbodyisyourstrad.com. One word.
Excellent. Well, and you mentioned the curiosity that we have and the trial and error in learning how to walk, for example. And I think of how many of the past interviewees have spoken to that connection between curiosity and inspiration, that always being sense of wonder and exploration is what leads to so much opening of new doors and new options. It's exciting.
Absolutely. Yeah, it goes back to, I think, healthy learning for kids is when their curiosity is being kept there all the time. And this is how they discover new things. It's not by we try to force ideas and make them follow certain ideas, but it actually allows them also to discover their passion. And that's why when I teach, I don't mind for a while having my students do wrong things. Yeah. Actually, sometimes I would ask them to do wrong things. For instance, when I teach like shifting on the cello, or when I talk about intonation. I mean, I find it a problem. I mean, it can be a problem when you focus on intonation. I'll take intonation because it's so central in string playing. And of course, we have to keep developing the ability to play in tune. But I find also the fear of playing out of tune becoming what I call, because of my background, I call it the intonation SS, the intonation Gestapo in us. And I don't think it's very healthy to live under that thing that is looming on us. I think just awareness. And the idea is, okay, it's helping the student develop that wish or curiosity to play in tune. It's not because I tell them that they play out of tune, or that somebody from the outside who is going to punish them for playing out of tune, or give them a low grade because of that, or going to critique them when they perform. But it is helping them become aware of what it feels like to play out of tune, what it feels like to play in tune in comparison. Mm-hmm. Which one is more appealing, more satisfying? And some people, I always compare it. Very often students who don't care that much about the intonation, they will just, okay, whatever, I'm just playing and I'm just fooling around. And I usually ask them, how do their room looks like? If the floor is clean or not. 90% of the cases, they laugh and say, wow, my mother would never want to come into my room. And I tell them, so that's exactly what is happening here, because if your room, all your clothes, dirty clothes are on the floor and everything, and you just drop a piece of paper somewhere, you won't even see it. You won't even recognize it. But if the room is really clean and you drop something, immediately you will see it. So it is what kind of environment we are teaching our students to live in, and slowly clean the room. And then you can see more and more what is happening there.
Yeah, that's a wonderful metaphor. I like it. All right. Well, Uri, thanks so much for your time and your thoughts. This has been a real pleasure talking with you, as it always is. I knew this one would be too.
Thank you, Benjamin. That's my pleasure. And yeah, we are not that far from each other. We should get together more often.
That sounds like a great plan. All right, and viewers, best of luck with your cello playing this weekend. Maybe you'll have a cleaner room by the end of the weekend as well. And we'll see you next time. Take care.